Hi everybody, welcome to Readers of the Lost Art with Stuart, who's calling himself Ocho Cervezas today, and I am Roger Melly's twin brother. And this is all the fault of Incontinent J in Texas, because I think in the comments we referenced Viz in a previous video, and Jay asked what Viz was. So the danger of asking a question in the comments is you're punished with answers from us too. And this is this is nearly all Stuart's gig in the sense that he's provided all the research. He is a bit of a Viz expert, and I'm along to give some barbed commentary from the sidelines. So over to you, over to you, Stuart.
Yeah, the real reason was like, how can I crash Paul's channel and subscription numbers by putting filth up? Sabotage. Yeah, we got this idea. Thanks, Jayfisk. I think it was it the Odyssey video we were talking about something, and we ended up going on a sidetrack with Viz Comic, a very famous British satirical kind of visual magazine, comic book for adults, I think it's been called. And
this isn't it, by the way.
This is not it.
Yeah.
This is obviously that in Britain we have the comic tradition, the satirical kind of political tradition, and I think this is actually quite an apt image. This was the image you provided, Paul, but yeah. I think it is really Britain coming apart at the seams at the moment. Literally with all the debacle, with potentially another prime minister. I think we'll be like 10 prime ministers in a decade, something crazy like that.
Yeah, it feels like Guatemala, or no disrespect to Guatemala, but I'm guessing they have quite a good turnover.
I was going to say, yeah, but we wouldn't be a banana republic, will we? Because we don't grow bananas.
What's the equivalent? Potato republic?
Potato, that'll be Ireland, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but that's Ireland haven't got monopoly on potatoes.
I suppose so. Yeah.
All right, what is Britain's main export? We might get onto humour, because I'd argue it's one of the last things we've got left.
That's where we're going to go today. Yeah.
This is what a pathetic country we've become. What do we actually produce? Nothing.
I'm trying to think nowadays. Yeah, it used to be music, but music's gone.
Yeah.
What is even is British music nowadays? I mean, look at the Eurovision entry this year.
I'd rather not, thanks.
Yeah. What I mean, this is what we're doing now, Paul, is an example of the hallmark of British humour is self-depreciation, isn't it?
Yeah, it's self-deprecation, I'd even say.
Self-deprecation.
Self-depreciation is when you put yourself on sale on eBay at a reduced cost.
Self-deprecation.
You tosser.
Yeah, I went to comprehensive school, so I can't.
To be fair to you, you got most of the right letters in mostly the right order, and just tried to sell the wrong word.
Absolutely,
to the unsuspecting public. But you're not getting away on my watch, matey.
No, too good for that. But yeah, I would say British humour is still hanging on by a skin of its teeth, really, isn't it?
Well, it's like the Blitz, without sounding too much of a boomer. It's what have you got left? It's in the absolute abyss of despair and despond. All you've got left. It's like I've always liked. Is it in Milton, the Slough of Despond, or is it Bunyan?
That's
the Slough of Despond always makes me giggle, because Slough, the place, is the most despondent place on earth. I know Slough meant something different in those days, but I think it's a beautiful phrase, the Slough of Despond.
It's a town in the south of England as well, isn't it?
That's what I'm referring to.
Yeah,
but who was it? Was it there was famous. I've forgotten that. My mind has gone. There's a British poet who talks about Slough being bombed. Who was it? It'll come to me, because I am seriously names. I can't remember names. That's the thing. I can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I also can't remember names. I can remember whole quotes. But if there's any doctors in the chat, is there a specific form of basic, senile dementia that only applies to names? Because I've got it.
We'll have to find out for you, Paul. I think for me, the key hallmark of British humour is this self-deprecating. Jasper Carrott, remember the British comedian Jasper Carrott? I don't think he does too much nowadays. So he might be dead, God knows. It's been a while, but I saw an interview with him quite a few years ago, and he said he on his very first tour in America, when he was trying to get into the American stand-up scene, he just kept bombing every night after night. He'd stand up, get a few laughs, booed off stage, heckled. And he asked an American comedian, he said, well, what does it take to get big in America? And the comedian said, well, the difference between American and British humor is American humor is all about success and British humor is all about failure. It's almost like a celebration or an acceptance of failure. And I really think that kind of hit home. And today we're going to be looking, I think there was a big boom in the 70s, 80s, 90s for these kind of filthy, satirical adult comics.
Sorry, Stuart, but this brings back, I'm just being triggered. It's memories of my dating experiences in the late 1980s.
Which one, left or right?
Both.
Simultaneously.
The haircut, for people who I know next to nothing about music, added to the long list of my ignorant topics, but the blonde on the left, that is the haircut from the Human League backup singers.
Oh, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Don't you want me, baby? And Phil Oakey had arguably the worst singing voice in the history of humankind, that's including me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul. Let's have a rendition again. No, I think our three viewers will go down to zero quite quickly. So let's hold on to what we've got.
No, I think you see, this is why I don't think you understand YouTube. The more we're talking about self-deprecation, the more humiliating and self-abasing the behavior on YouTube, the higher the viewing figures.
Oh, it's true, isn't it? Yeah.
So me singing in my Speedos, all doused in goose fat would probably
in Diddy oil.
Yeah, seriously, would break the 1 million viewer barrier. So.
Oh man, that's what you need. A bit of controversy. Who was it? Max Clifford, the publicist.
Yeah.
That was held his big thing in the 90s, wasn't it? Yeah, Viz is the amazing thing about Viz is this, despite everything in the UK going a bit politically correct, Viz has not changed one little bit. You can still buy this. I think it's gone from weekly or fortnightly to monthly now. But this is something that you can still buy in any British supermarket. Any British
can I share with you while this image is on? I was working at University of Salford back in the day, and I would never forget we had some visitors from, I think it was Italy. So I'm in a black cab going through Stockport, and I think I was taking them like either to the train station or somewhere, and it was like a Friday or Thursday night, very late. And the pubs were letting out, and I'd never forget to my dying day the look on the faces of these Italians, because my experience of Italian public behavior, or at least it used to be, it's very self-possessed, and they're obsessed about image and what they look like.
Absolutely, yeah.
And in the streets of Stockport, we stopped at some traffic lights, and there were people banging on the taxi with pizza in their hand, just mumbling incoherently. And these Italians were like, what are these people? Why are they in public? And I was thinking, that's an average, Thursday night.
Yeah, that's your average big fat slags.
No, seriously, but it was like Sodom and Gomorrah. And the one thing I find, I don't mean to be body shamist or anything, because who am I to speak? I no longer have the body of an Adonis. But there is this thing about when there were certain styles, so thongs came into fashion.
Yeah.
And what I do love about the British sensibility is women who were absolutely Darwinistically not suited to wearing a thong saw it as their birthright and proceeded to wear them.
Yeah, and thou shalt wear thou thong.
Yeah, seriously.
It really is. Yeah.
I'm sure Leviticus had a phrase that forbade it, but they did it. And
abomination.
Yeah, and it was just like cellulite or anything that was inappropriate to be shown. It's my body, I'll have it out there. Yeah. And part of me finds it shocking, and part of me thinks maybe that's Britain's last export to the world, a complete lack of self-awareness, self-shame, whatever you want to call it.
It's both at the same time. Have you seen that new it's like a new trend on YouTube. I think in the UK they call them auditors, YouTube auditors.
Oh yeah.
And they're basically people go around with GoPro cameras into town centres. I mean, I think it started out as like town centres on a night out, but I think the UK has become so dystopian now that you can go out in the town centre during the day. I was watching one guy yesterday. He was out in Glasgow during the day, and it was like gangs of feral teenagers attacking each other in the street, police arresting people on every corner, and it was just insane. But if you watch some of these videos, a traditional British night out on the lash, we say, on the booze or the sauce, you will see characters like the Viz, big ladies here. You will see people urinating, fornicating, deprecating.
Lord Mandelson even had a bit of outside urination.
Lord Mandelson, yeah. Even our politicians love to relieve themselves in the street. It's carnivalesque. It's pure chaos, and I think it represents Britain quite nicely. And I think this is probably why the Viz comic has stuck around so long and become a bit of a tradition. Even in the times of declining print media sales, I think it really is a British institution. It's lowbrow, it's crude, it's disgusting, it's violent, it's obscenity beyond what you would see in many other countries. And it's absolutely brilliant. But at the same time, this lowbrow humor, I think, has a very kind of highbrow tradition behind it that makes it all the more special.
Yeah, I'm ignorant in this area, Stuart, but like Charlie Hebdo, would I be wrong in saying somewhere like France has a tradition of quite cruel political satire? But I don't think, for example, the French would ever have this type of... Again, a personal memory, I was in a motorway service station as a young kid, and I remember watching a French guy watching a telly mounted on a wall, having one of these horrible machine coffees just to have a rest from driving. And he's looking up at the TV, and it was Benny Hill, and he was laughing hysterically. And I was about 12, and I thought, what a childish sense of humor you've got, mate.
Yeah.
So there's something about Viz for me is cruel, scabrous, scatological, but also there's a knowing adult intellect behind it at the same time. It's quite paradoxical.
Yeah, I think, and that's another hallmark of British comedy. It's multi-layered, densely layered at times. I think it's very class conscious as well. There's a comic very similar in Spain called El Jueves, and there's a tradition in Spain of political satire. I mean, even going back to the Franco times, there was some political satire allowed, but it's much more safe. I think you mentioned the word cruelty, that there's that cruel kind of, brutal mocking aspect of Viz. It's like no punches held sort of thing, which in the Spanish equivalent, you kind of lack that. There still needs to maintain an integrity of the person that you're mocking, so you can mock them gently. You can maybe mock their political beliefs, but you can't mock their physical appearance. And the Viz really kind of relishes itself on mocking the physical appearance of British people and British society from all strata of life. It's from the top to the bottom. Viz does not hold back.
Again, you see, I'm not an expert in international filth, but in terms of British filth, you could argue quite pretentiously that the roots if they go back, who knows how far. But for example, I'm thinking of Chaucer.
Yeah,
there's a I remember I did The Merchant's Tale at A level, and I'll never forget. There's a line: so the blind merchant's in the lower, standing at the bottom of a tree, and his young nubile wife's up in the higher branches having it off with a bow. And she says, we're just cuddling. And he says words to the effect of, cuddling, ye all gat in it went. And there's loads of the crudity in Chaucer. And Chaucer's, one of the first literary major figures in British culture.
Yeah, it's not subtle, is it? It's not, wink, wink, we're all in the joke. It's just like, here is the phallus, here is the rectum, here is the pissing in the street, no holds barred. And yeah, it's very unique. I think it's interesting to talk very briefly just about the history of humor and philosophy, because I've always thought of philosophy as being a little bit kind of scared of the concept of humor. For such a important part of human experience, philosophy hasn't typically known how to place humor, and I think even to this day, there's not that many philosophers who've actually tried to engage in like with what humor actually is. So I know you're doing a lot of videos on the Odyssey. We've done a couple together with James as well, talking about the Christopher Nolan film, and that's got you into the Odyssey and kind of Greek. Would you say the Odyssey's tragedy?
It's epic
Yeah,
because it all ends with positive, in a way, revenge without. There's no tragedy for the goodies, so you couldn't call it tragedy.
it's not a full tragedy.
No, it's epic. It's
Yeah,
obviously tragic for the victims, but the way the whole Odyssey is portrayed is the victims had what was coming and they were warned in advance, so no punishment is too great for them.
yeah. So it's kind of outside of the tragedy and comedy scale in Greek theatre.
Yeah.
It's interesting because if you look at the Platonic dialectics, sorry, that the Platonic dialects, Plato kind of seems to suggest directly that humor is, if we think of humor as different to comedy in the theatrical tradition, Plato seems to suggest that humor is a negative thing because it stands in the way of reason. When we laugh hysterically, we lose our faculties and we kind of step outside of reason. And Thomas Hobbes as well, he kind of takes a similar line for that. So if you think of earlier philosophy, how it tried to address humor, you get this thing called the superiority theory, this idea that the person mocking, the person laughing, is laughing at somebody else's misfortune. And therefore that creates a power imbalance. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, but I'm trying to think, is it the Thracian women? There's a Greek legend whereby the philosopher's walking along and falls in a hole, and two local women laugh their heads off at him because he's looking up at the sky because he's full of this abstract reason. And there's
Yep.
the earthy local peasant women find this hilarious. And I think true intellect is when you can have both.
Absolutely.
And also, the Plato thing, you and I'd love to at a future date do much more on Plato because
Yeah.
I think he's misrepresented by lots of people as being everything he says is
It's
literally
been literal,
true.
yeah.
And given that, for example, he says the poets wouldn't be allowed in the Republic, and yet there are poetic and rhetorical devices and allegories throughout his complete work. And
Yeah.
most of his philosophy is expressed in the form of dialogue in a very dramatic, theatrical way. So for him to say, I would ban poetry is completely self-condemnatory. So
Yeah.
I think Plato's much more nuanced, layered, and was having a bit of laugh on the side. And
Yeah.
there's rather po-faced Western later interpreters haven't got Plato's humour.
I would agree with that to some extent. I would also say I think Socrates himself in the dialects at times comes across as like a comedy figure, a very ironic comedy figure. And if you take Diogenes as well, I mean Diogenes is a progenitor to the sort of humor we see in Viz. Very very crude, very kind of bodily kind of sense of humor that seems to suggest. But again, it's hard to really kind of say with certainty because obviously we're reading a culture 2,000, 3,000 years ago from our modern day sensibilities. So it's interesting, isn't it? I would agree with you partly that I think Plato is misread.
Well, I'm doing a video on it's going to be called, it's linked to the series on the Odyssey, but it's called Imagine No Religion, and it's based upon a book by that title, which actually says it argues it brilliantly. When we use the word religion to explain what was going on in ancient times, they had no conception of what we know by the word religion.
Exactly.
And there's this human tendency to, when you look back in time, you impose your own categories. And that's what I think we do with Plato. There's an act of translation. And I've been thinking a lot about this because maybe the Viz type stuff is the thing that maintains over the millennia. It's this cathartic release of laughter. And it always struck me that why I think humor works, when you try to analyze it, if you analyze a good joke, it stops being funny. That's another aspect of it. But I've always thought that humor is based upon the incommensurability of two different things.
Yeah.
And it's designed to puncture appearances, and it's designed to puncture the reasoned status quo. And I think that's what's wonderful about humor, this idea that it lasts over the centuries and it doesn't ultimately. The first caveman, we might have discussed this, the first caveman probably laughed at another caveman stubbing his toe on a rock.
Yeah.
There's a
Or
pratfall.
farting by the campfire. Yeah, they probably sat around the campfire lighting their own farts.
Well, you may say that, Stuart. I couldn't possibly comment. But
if only we had the time machine.
But that strikes me as what's common. But this thing about not being able to understand truly where people came from.
Yeah.
The humour would have been different. Notions of religion would have been drastically different. And what saddens me is that rather than lean into the difference, rather than think ancient Greece must have been like going to Mars, completely alien. Within education, this is something I want to talk about more in future. Within education, there's always this tendency to say, "Oh, let's make this as accessible as we can. Let's do Shakespeare with the Jets, or Romeo and Juliet. Let's do it as a pair of gangs in leather jackets and sports cars." And it's like, well, I can see some usefulness, but on the other hand, what about saying to young people, this is going to blow your mind because it's so not what you're used to. And it doesn't relate to you in your world always. Parts of it will, but there are parts of it that you have no idea how these people thought. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Rather than pander all the time to relevance.
Yeah.
But anyway,
absolutely.
I fear I'm digressing and ranting.
No, not at all. Just to quickly kind of tail end that is, I think Federico Fellini's film, the Satiricon, is a fantastic example of where he tries to make it as difficult as possible, both visually and in the script, as difficult as possible for us to relate to the characters. And I think he said in that film, the Rome that he was trying to present in that was almost like science fiction. Because he actually argued in an interview. He said, "How on God's earth can we know what ancient Rome was like? It's a culture so different. We are interpreting it. If we try to interpret it in terms of what a modern person would think Rome was like, then we're not getting the full effect." So he made it as so outlandish and strange and bizarre and abstract as possible. And he said, "Well, that's the point, because I think if you travel back 2,000 years, you just wouldn't recognize barely anything." And yeah,
but the bit you would recognize, bringing it back to Viz.
Yeah,
the bit you would recognize. Have you ever seen? I've in the past. I should have got some for today, but there's you see depictions of Roman graffiti, and it is unbelievably crude. And Roman graffiti, ancient Roman graffiti, was not a million miles from Viz humor.
It's exactly the same. Yeah, I've seen a couple in Pompeii. There's someone wrote on the wall. It was basically the ancient Roman equivalent of the modern, for a good time, call this number.
Yeah,
I think it's something like Allegra 8 Sisterci. She lives here, something like that. For a good time, call Allegra.
Sextus Biggest Stickers.
Yeah, Biggest Stickers. Yeah. Oh yeah. He has a life, incontinentia buttocks. Oh, great stuff. Well, we'll have to do a video on the pythons at some point as well. I think it all mixes nicely into this. But yeah, the incongruity theory kind of traced back to Kant and Schopenhauer. This is where I think your idea comes in, and when it starts, that humor is the clashing of two different things, two things that seem quite out of place, which I think Viz can be marked nicely. But I think Viz also heavily draws on this notion of the carnival and the idea of the grotesque. So you've read Gargantua and Pantagruel, haven't you?
A long time. I've got a beautiful edition with all the original illustrations, but it's a long time since I've read it. But again, I'm triggered. That's basically me at dinner time.
A little homunculi to feed you. So yeah, the book was Mikhail Bakhtin was a Russian literary critic, wasn't he? A literary theorist. So his big thing was literature.
And he wrote, and so on, yeah.
That's right, yeah. He wrote this very famous book, Rabelais and His World. I think it's 1965. Probably the original Russian version was in 1965, but it's been translated into, I think, every single language. And he took the work of Francois Rabelais and this notion of carnival. Now, we don't really have carnival in the UK. What's interesting living in Spain here is that Spain still has carnival in February. I think it's not the same as medieval carnival nowadays. The tradition's still being retained. But it's definitely a little bit more sterilized now. Instead of people dressing up in phallic costumes and fornicating and everything's suspended for a day,
They
dress
save
up in.
that. I was going to say, sorry to interrupt. They save that for pride marches.
That's it. Well, actually, funny you mentioned that, because the carnival in Las Canarias, the Canary Islands, is still big on drag queens and transvestites, and it's still a little bit closer to the medieval carnival. But yeah, I think in mainland Spain, everyone dresses up as Spider-Man and Superman, and basically gets drunk and eats a lot. But I mean, that's as close as it gets. But the medieval carnival had a lot of significance. So I think Bakhtin himself says medieval carnival is a special form of free and familiar contact reigned among people who were usually divided by the barriers of caste, property, profession, and age. So it's this medieval folk culture. It's usually for a period or a week where the king would become the fool, and the fool would be anointed a king, and it just kind of.
I'm just wondering
shit broke loose.
Yeah, from the British example though, I wonder whether because of Magna Carta and because of feudalism ended a bit earlier, and I'm treading dangerously here because I'm not great on history, but I wonder whether because of the rise of the Industrial Revolution and the enclosure and all this type of stuff, but we had a concentrated working class before a lot of countries. Even in the rural areas, we had the Magna Carta and certain protected rights. So I'm just wondering whether, because we had medieval religious festivals all the time, but I just wonder whether over time there was less of a need to formalize it. My description of what happened in Stockport that night, where everyone just goes bonkers, is linked to your Rabelaisian point. But I think in the UK, at least, there's always been a tradition where you do it every weekend. It's not. I think the Spanish and other people tend to like big festivals very occasionally, whereas we have this Sodom and Gomorrah every Friday, Saturday night in town centres in a way that they never would. And I think that's one of the differences. We've basically desublimated, to use a pretentious phrase. We've brought down carnivalesque behaviour and made it more regular.
So we do it on a rolling basis, whereas I would argue, Spanish society, Italian society, definitely, because it was still under the Catholic Church for much longer. There was more of a need for big festivals and more of a need of a pressure release, because the day-to-day was more strictly controlled. Whereas with Magna Carta, the kind of, we in the UK were more liberal more sooner. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, and there's also, it might not sound directly linked, but I think it is. There's an apocryphal story where the Duke of Wellington was walking amongst the troops before the Battle of Trafalgar. Yeah. Sorry, Waterloo. Trafalgar was on water and would have been slightly different to walk on water. That would have made him Jesus. Anyway, the Waterloo. And he's walking around and he famously observed to his adjutant, he said, I don't know about the French, but they scare the bejesus out of me. Because it was this lumpen proletariat ahead of its time. The absolute thuggery that was the backbone of the empire. Basically, you could send these louts who were like football hooligans, but there was an immense reservoir of football hooligan type violence that you could inflict on the rest of the world. Basically, and it's a part of our heritage as, that there'll be some bloodline in the UK that's from the Vikings and that raider like the beer. I do think there's a weird, like, the Celtic people tend to be, from my Irish background, very boozy and will fight at the drop of a hat. Mix that with a bit of Viking blood, and we were a genetic petri dish for aggressive drunk behaviour.
Yeah, and the Anglo-Saxons as well.
I'll throw them in.
No, I completely, and the Scots as well. I mean, they were pretty much known for, well, they're the Celts, pretty much known for a bit of the old ultra violence. What's interesting I find about Bakhtin, which is very relevant to Viz, is this kind of idea of the lower body. If you think of the upper body as reason and sanity, whereas the carnival focus being on the lower body, feces, urinating, fornicating, copulating. Bakhtin argued that in Rabelais, this is the I think it's the substratum, the lower stratum he calls it. This is often denigrated, but during Carnival is a celebration that this is the reproductive organ, fornicating, defecating. You defecate onto the ground, fertilize the ground, and this brings new life. So Carnival, he was actually arguing that the lower body, which is repressed in day to day, is super important. It's like where life comes from. It's regenerative. It's renewing. So I guess it's just an arty-farty way of using theory to kind of justify the scatological humor in Viz to some extent. But I definitely think there's something there to it.
Sorry, Jimbo's kicking off in the comments saying we're not responding to him. So
Oh,
is he just wasting his time? You answer that one, Stuart. I tend to be more confrontational.
we can answer it. Let's go through some questions. Yeah, Plato does include jokes. Yeah, I think we've covered that.
We said that.
Yeah, Plato's probably been misread by po-faced academics. Yeah, Henri Bergson. I want to cover that in a separate video. It's actually Freud wrote an essay on humor, and Bergson wrote an essay on humor, and I think there's enough material there. There's enough difference in what we're talking about today. With
Adorno wrote an essay on cartoons, but yeah, we can't cover everything immediately all the time at once. Now,
yeah, we'll try our best, but anyhow, swiftly moving on. Yeah, so British satire. I think there's the medieval marginalia, flying fallacies. You know, these were like religious monks. They would draw these obscene drawings and cartoons. Have you seen the film Superbad, Paul?
No, but I'm just slightly bemused and nonplussed by my body double on a medieval manuscript.
So yeah, it does look a bit like you.
That shut you up.
right in the pole. Oh man, I'm gonna start corpsing you. So I thought I'd try and do this as straight laced as possible, but I think by the end of it, we're just gonna be in floods. Yeah, so medieval marginalia. Lots of examples in British medieval manuscripts of fallacies, people farting, people bearing arses at each other, which is probably kind of a bit like a release valve for monks. But then we go up to the British political satire with people like James Cruikshank, William Hogarth, which you will know from your channel, Paul. These are legitimate artists. These are
Hogarth
works in the British Museum and National Gallery and all sorts of stuff. Punch magazine was probably the first, or at least it's the most famous. We moved from engravings and wood prints to physical magazine. We've got Monty Python. I think Terry Gilliam, his animation really draws heavily on the grotesque. Up to modern day political comics and the Viz, which we're going to go on to. But this is something in British culture that's been around for quite a long time. Now, I think we can do separate videos on these because I want to get through and start kind of doing a detailed analysis of the Viz. But Hogarth, he was born in 1697, died 1764, and he was arguably the first kind of the modern style of satirist. And this is 6, I think it's wood prints. I think he did them as paintings first, and then they're reproduced as wood prints. But it's called A Harlot's Progress. It's about a pretty young girl who moves to London, and in the very first scene, she's told by a lady, if you're a prostitute, you can make a lot of money. And it basically works through her life, working as a courtesan, and she ends up working on the street, and then she dies of venereal disease. What things about Hogarth I want to point out at this point is there was a moral dimension to Hogarth. There was a class aspect in the sense that he was talking down to the lower class from a position of kind of bourgeois acceptability, and he was in the grotesque images that he produced. He was trying to make a moral point, which as we get onto the Viz, that moral dimension basically disappears, and we can't really in Viz we can't really kind of find the political center, I would argue.
Yeah, except I push back slightly in the sense that I do think Viz is very good for puncturing the mass media's. The mass media has a certain way of talking, a certain mode of discourse, a certain what goes without saying, Roland Barthes would call it. So there's an ideology in the mainstream media, even when it's pretending not to be ideological. And I think Viz makes fun of that and undermines it. And so in the for topicality at the moment, Britain's political system is imploding. But one of the reasons everyone feels so viscerally angry is you've got just like this technocrat at the top who's had a charismaectomy. And it's not about it's not about, but this is the interesting point. It's not about left versus right. So I always use the example, I don't agree with Jeremy Corbyn's politics whatsoever. But I never, ever had any feelings of animosity or visceral dislike for him, because I always figured he thinks differently, but he sincerely holds these views. And he clearly states his principles all the time. Yep. So I don't think many people in Britain, there'll be some, old unregenerated rightists who don't like Corbyn at a visceral level. But I think it's perfectly possible to profoundly disagree with someone's politics. Increasingly less today, unfortunately. But why people hate Starmer is that he is a technocrat. He's soulless, and he's only about power for its own sake, more than even most politicians.
Yeah, and I think what does he believe?
Yeah, and Viz just makes fun of that whole self-righteousness, the whole normality of a society that tries to hide the things it doesn't want to talk about. So the fat slags, the whole northern culture element. I was hearing a political discussion on the radio all about the current machinations in Labour, and a couple of Times reporters were speaking to a northern person, and they tried to tell him that such and such might Angela Rayner might be a genuine candidate, and he just said, "You're talking rubbish. I go back to Stockport, which is her area, every weekend, and they hate her." Yeah, and you could tell just momentarily these commentators were nonplussed, because someone who actually knew what they were talking about working class culture was giving them the unvarnished truth. And so many people would look at Viz and say, this is misogynistic, it's this, it's that. But whatever you say about it, there's also a large kernel of truth to it.
That's what makes it funny.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't be funny if it was science fiction nonsense.
Exactly, yeah.
And they say what shouldn't be said, what can't be said, and they say, no, we're going to say it.
Yeah. I've got a great example of that coming up, how it just, if you live in Britain, you will identify these characters. You cannot write it off as being misogynistic or, woke left or, far right. It's just, it's factual. But yeah, he's an example. This is James Gillray. This is another satirist. He was a big fan of Hogarth, and he was kind of the next generation, so to speak. And his images just gave me more grotesque. You hear a lady with her special cannon firing at a palace with someone's arse firing shit back at her. And it's the scatological humor was there, 200 years ago.
Especially since this is against the royal family.
Exactly, yeah.
Which of its time you would think would be, verboten. And I use the word verboten deliberately, because most of our royal family are actually German.
Exactly, yeah. There's an interesting story about this one. I'll cover this on a separate video, but the story was, it was basically like a lady of society, but of slight ill repute. She'd forged some love letters to try and, get married into the royal family or something like that. So
that's how I got married.
Is that how you forged love letters?
Yeah.
Chat GPT'd. So yeah, we're going to move on to Viz now. So this crude humor it's accepted in Britain. It's part of the artistic culture. I mean, the Tate Britain did a exhibition that I went to in 2010, basically celebrating all things rude, crude, and Britannic. So it's it's legitimate stuff. So we're gonna we'll cut past on. We're gonna get through to the Viz now. Paul, are you ready to laugh your ass off?
Yes.
So what's it? You mentioned it before, Northern Humor and the interview with Angela Rayner. What's interesting about the Viz is it was started in 1979 in Newcastle. So I think Chris Donald he was a guy who dropped out of university after I think a couple of months, and it was him and his unemployed friends basically created. I think they're called zines nowadays, aren't they? Kind of self-published zines, maybe.
Tomato.
Sein und Zeit. He was
no, Sein und Scheit. That's on you. That's on you magazine.
That was just a podcast, yeah. So what's interesting about Viz was he basically, I think the first one he made 150 photocopied copies and sold it in his local pub. and it absolutely ballooned. Started in Newcastle, and then it made its way south. And at one point in the 90s, it was actually the third most popular magazine in the UK, ahead of the Radio Times, and I think it was the TV Times. I'm not joking. So, I mean, it's a big claim to be that famous, but the humor is uncompromising, and I think Northern humor, it's kind of British humor with an extra element of malice and cruelty to some extent, but that's part of the humor. That's what you kind of grew up with if you're from the north of England. It copied the DC Thompson comics of the time. So the Beano is actually, I think it's in the Guinness Book of Records for longest running weekly comic or something like that.
Was that published in Dundee or something? I have that in the back of my mind.
It was, yeah. It was published up in Dundee, and the Viz actually did the rip of it. The Viz, when it started, actually would take Beano characters and do like obscene versions of it. And DC Thompson actually took them to court a few times. so Viz got taken to court for copyright. So what Viz did was, we'll look at it in a second. Viz did a comic of DC Thompson as a grumpy Scottish guy walking around the town kind of complaining about copyright, and then we'll see it in a second. But yeah, the Beano's still going in it, and it's the style of this kind of post-war, kids comic, subvert, which in itself was quite subversive humor, but it's like a double subversion with scatological humor. So and it also lampoons the British press, the tabloid press as well, with some sections. So Daily Star, would you say? But I always thought the Daily Star has been a bit left-leaning.
Slightly, but I think all tabloids are basically lobotomized, apolitically, not a lot going on upstairs.
Well, my college media studies tutor, he basically said he thought the Star is like comics for builders, and the Daily Mail is comics for middle managers. I think that from memory, that was what he.
And the Guardian is a humorless comic for leftists.
I don't know where the Guardian is nowadays. The Guardian's I would say the Guardian is the wokerati tofu eating toilet paper of choice. But anyway, should we get onto some Viz then?
Yeah.
What do you want to go first?
I was already going to make. You can make a crude comment about that subtitle, but no. Let's get into some images.
So I need to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen. If I share my screen,
while you're doing that, Stuart, do you notice how cleverly I fix my drooping camera syndrome?
I noticed. What did you chewing gum?
No, I've got a pencil box wedged underneath. It was either that or digital Viagra, and I chose to use an old-fashioned pencil box.
Sounds good. Right. Well, look at that. What's that effect called in computers when you go on to infinity?
Well, I don't know. In art, it's a mise on a beam.
A mise on a beam. We're going to bring it the mise on a beam. Now, Paul, you're going to disappear slightly while I bring these up, because I'm going to try and bring them up on full screen. So I think we just go first into the misogyny. What do you think?
Yeah, go on. Can
you see? Horrible, fat, ugly. It's the Raji wife. No. This is where we start corpsing and have to call it off early. So for our North American viewers, Raji in Newcastlese basically means angry. So if you're a Raji, you're basically someone who gets pissed off all the time.
Yeah, so Paul Raji Taylor would be a perfect middle name for me.
You are the perfect Raji, yeah. So it starts off, I mean, just even straight away, there's graffiti on the wall here. We've got boobs, we've got tits just drawn on the wall. We've got dog shit on the floor. Buy stuff now. We've got a critique of capitalism there. Someone looks like they're having a piss against the wall here, just in that single frame where we've got so much going on about British society. So next frame, I'm going to try to do a Geordie accent. I really fancy a fucking foursome to eat me. So the neat means tonight. So it's basically just your average everyday Joe walking down the street. We've got this Rabelaisian character here. We've got Cliff over here. Listen to that man, he's a dirty cunt.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
that's now taken off YouTube.
no, it has, yeah. But it's coont, Paul. It means something else. Just
Right.
But yeah, it's basically just an obscene foul mouth. Oh, sexy, I love to fuck you the need. The thing is, though, if you go to any British town centre at nighttime or daytime, you're going to see people like this, and you're going to see people talking like this. So, as you said, you know, what makes this funny is because there's an element of truth to it. There we go. It's so obscene. I mean, there's no holds barred, is there, in Viz?
So to speak.
Yeah. Would you like to comment on that, Paul?
I'll just keep making innuendos.
You'll keep making
over
your
here.
innuendos. Now, one of the famous characters, I think, right? He was in Viz quite early on there. Sid the Sexist. Now, this is, I think the byline was Tyneside silver-tongued cavalier. So yeah, it's basically just a sexist guy, and every strip is him trying to basically get lucky with a girl. So he pulls out all these silly chat up lines. He just has no concept of women's rights or anything like that. He always fails in the end. I mean, going back to this idea that British comedy draws heavily on failure. I think Sid the Sexist works in double ways. I mean, if you lived in the north of England in the 80s and 90s, then there were people like this. You know, sexism was quite common. Homophobia was quite common. Where I grew up, it was I think it was just the standard. So people would have had parents, people would have had dads who basically were Sid the Sexist. So he is like the average kind of everyman, but at the same time, yeah, he never succeeds. There's always something that happens to him that he fails.
For balance, have you got any militant?
Militant's coming soon, and there's
good.
the balance.
Yay.
So yeah, this is kind of what's interesting about Viz is we have a strip that's basically criticizing a sexist misogynist, but then on the next page we're going to have someone that's criticizing radical feminism. And what is interesting about Viz is it really gets into the whole notion of hypocrisy, and it has this kind of burning, kind of vermin dislike for hypocrisy. So I think in this strip,
do you know, sorry to interrupt, do you know when this particular issue was roughly when it was published?
I don't know this one. I mean, judging by the paper quality, it's probably one of the 80s.
That's what I was thinking, because in those terms, given militant is basically a radical lesbian version of the extreme wokeism now.
Yeah.
So this really was documenting what is now commonplace when this was still unusual.
Yeah. But going back to the politics of it, Paul, militant was
it was Liverpool. It was radical Labour in Liverpool.
It was, yeah. And then it was Kinnock. I think Kinnock came in and there was a battle. I can't remember the exact details. I remember
distinctly. It was, what's his name? Oh God, it's names again. But there was a famous Labour Party conference where Kinnock,
Michael Foot.
Derek Hatton, Degsy was the deputy leader in Liverpool, and he sat there in a Labour Party conference, and militant were expelled from the Labour Party, and it was all a big hoo-ha.
Yeah.
But it was basically far left within an already quite left-wing Labour Party at the time.
Quite leftist at the time. So when Jeremy Corbyn, bringing it up to the modern day, when Jeremy Corbyn came in, there was all talk about militant again, or Corbyn is militant 2.0 and things like that. So, I mean, the essential kind of brunt of the sketch is she's so over the top misanthropic. She's so like to a point, like irritatingly so. She actually kind of by the end is, you know, she's complaining, oh, you know, sexism, blah blah blah, misogyny. But then by the end of the sketch, it's like, you know, women's refuge, no men, male exclusion. So it's showing the hypocrisy of her position. Like she herself is a very prejudiced person.
Yeah, in that sense, if you put it, that's why I said the balance. You get this, you get Sid the Sexist, but what
Yep.
Viz was actually good at, it's your point, it addressed hypocrisy as a whole.
Yep.
And all of these but this is just so far ahead of its time, because what you have nowadays is ideology that is, in its very essence, hypocritical, excludes from reflection so many issues that are just too uncomfortable to confront.
Yeah.
And on it goes.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this is a Sid the Sexist sketch. So it's basically, it shows his naivety. Like even some of the characters have darker traits. Like there's some kind of relatability to them. So in this sketch, yeah, Sid the Sexist, go back to the crude Rabelaisian humor. He's basically got some venereal disease. And they're talking, go and get your knob checked at the doctors and stuff like that. And he's so worried, he's so insecure himself. His sexism kind of hides this insecurity. He's like, I don't want to go to the doctors because, what if there's a female doctor? They'll laugh at me. They'll laugh at my penis, kind of thing. So his mates say, "Oh, it's not like that nowadays, Sid. Don't worry about it. It's good. Doctors nowadays, confidentiality, blah blah blah." But then when he goes to the doctors. So yeah, it's so cruel, but it's just you see him at the end. Yeah, this is why I won't go to the doctors. I don't want to get laughed at. And then yeah, the infamous fat slags. What I love about it, to call someone a slag in the UK is it's incredibly harsh. It's you'd probably get a slap, I think, if you did it, but these characters, they celebrate their voluptuousness. You know what I mean? It's like they're so unashamed. Just ladies out on the town just up for a good time. They don't really care what they look like. They're just out there, showing it. Also, I think far from being kind of misogynistic, the fat slags, I would say, represent gender, a gender equality. Someone that they I think nowadays they use the term body positive, don't they?
Yeah.
The fat slags were like the original kind of body positive. They're totally unashamed.
And also, again, it's so far ahead of its time, because the use, I've seen various militant body positivists, if that's a sensible phrase, and that one woman in one of these big discussions actually said, I'm offended and triggered by your use of the word obese. So yeah. This body trainer says in desperation, well, what can I call you that's not going to trigger you? And she said, we call ourselves fat. And I was thinking, obese is a medical, objective term. And you don't like that, but fat, with all its history, you're well prepared to accept.
Exactly.
Makes no sense.
That's the thing, and Viz really lampoons this. There's some people they're just out for trouble. They're just out for a disagreement, and the hypocrisy is on a different level. So yeah, straight away, that's the topic of gender, and yeah, I think it covers it in such a detailed way while taking the piss at the same time. 8 Ace, I think 8 Ace might actually be my favorite character, Paul.
What is he? I haven't seen this.
8 Ace, he's. I actually have the original strip. You can tell the accents in the writing. So I think Fat Slags is Newcastle. Sid the Sex is Newcastle. 8 Ace, from my reading, he's from Yorkshire. I think someone said potentially from Wakefield. He's basically just a dysfunctional family with an alcoholic father. And every episode or every edition, he tries to get his life back on track. But there's a lot of underlying, very dark kind of social commentary, in the sense, it goes to like this concept, like, benefit scroungers, dysfunctional working class families, alcoholism, the effects of alcoholism on children, domestic violence and things like that. So it's a very dark sketch. And you can tell just by his look, he's lost all his teeth. He's gone beyond alcoholism. He's just a wreck of a man, grotesque if there ever was one. And in this sketch, he's obviously been in trouble with the law, and his wife's divorcing him. And you can tell by the language. I won't read any of it out. But he's basically missed the court appointment. So he had a court appointment to discuss proceedings, for custody of his kids, and he missed it. And the reason why she's divorcing him is for domestic violence. You can see why. He's basically justified why he's getting divorced. And every episode, he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to get my life back together. I'm going to get it back together." And you know, he lives in the garden shed. His wife won't let him in the house, so he has to live in the shed. And he sells his shed. But the joke is, every episode, he ends up going back to the off license, and he gets 8 cans of cheap beer for £1.49. So you can see here, it's like the joke is that she gets half of his property. So he sells the house for £2.98. He sells his shed for £2.98. Half of £2.98, and he's working it out in his head. What's half of £2.98? And he's like £1.49. Or what costs £1.49? And there he goes back to the local mini market to buy his beer, and it just starts again. Yeah, it's just dark and quite depressing in quite a funny way. Grotesque. So it's this one. The wife's asked him to like do some DIY, get rid of this wasp's nest. So all he knows is like bashing and smashing. So he gets a hammer, he smashes the wasp's nest, and he ends up having to kill the pain with another 8 cans of beer. But is this the very first one? Yeah, this is the first one. So the very first one is basically, he starts off, he gets drunk. He walks home, he's swearing and swaggering all the way home. Gets home, his wife's locked him out, so he's bashing on the door. Let me in. And the wife comes out. You see, the wife's got a black eye, and it's just, oh man, yeah. But I grew up around people like this, not in my family, but in my hometown. That there was people that looked like this, those people that acted like this, those people talk like this. So when I first got into Viz at the eligible age of probably about 10 or 11 years old, I was like, what's this? You know, is this graduating from the Beano? This is a comic about my hometown. And there's the Rabelaisian, like the Carnival, bare bodily fluids. Smashes on the door. He wakes up in the morning. Oh, what happens? What happens? And then back straight to the pub, more race. So, yeah, the joys of alcoholism.
Yeah, it just reminds me, there's a Rolo, to pretensify it a bit, if I'm making up a new word now, but there's a Rollo May, was a psychotherapist, psychoanalyst type figure back in the last century and middle of it. And he wrote I'm going to use it on the channel in the near future, but he wrote an article about basically the psychotherapeutic benefits of myth, the Greek myths. Yeah. And part of it is, I think he mentions, who would it be? Aeschylus wrote this trilogy, and it's all about Agamemnon being murdered by his wife, and the dysfunctionality, and the son having to get revenge. So there's a stifling family dynamic going on, and Rollo May makes the point, if you could imagine being in ancient Greece, a young adolescent watching this theatre, and you're seeing played out on stage all your hormonal imbalances, all your psychological disturbances, in your darkest moments when everyone's wanted to... Am I sharing too much? Everyone's wanted to kill their parents. But just all this dysfunctionality.
Yeah.
And Rollo May's saying that's what Greek tragic theatre managed to encapsulate. And it reality. Must have been, But it's this release. You're sat there watching it thinking, I'm not alone in the world. This isn't as abnormal as I thought it was. And just the practical benefit of seeing it acted out stops you having to obsess about it.
Yeah, because it's all normal.
Yeah, and the flip side of that is comics like Viz represent the seedy underside of the lumpen proletariat that we're all supposed to pretend doesn't exist. And you're not allowed to say it because you're being prejudicial to a certain demographic. And you could apply this to lots of demographics in society. You're not allowed to say certain things. Yeah. So in Liverpool, there's a reputation for stealing. And I could actually do an hour lecture on one of the practical reasons, because it was a port and because of various socioeconomic issues. If things are coming into a port, it's like, you get opportunities to steal you wouldn't if there wasn't a port in your area. And a whole, informal barter system springs up. So there's a whole culture that led Liverpool people to having, light-fingered tendencies. But if you say that, Scousers are thieving so-and-sos, I can say it because I'm from there. But so many people, you can't say that. Well, actually, there is an element. I remember going to Madrid, ironically, on a school trip.
Yeah.
And we basically went into a shop, and it was like a biblical plague of locusts. It was just the shop was bare when we left.
Oh man.
And that was, we were 17.
Yeah.
And that's
why the Spanish hate the British.
No, seriously, I'll never forget. we got the plane home from Madrid airport, and I turned to my left, and one of my schoolmates had a life-size cardboard cutout of Diego Maradona under his arm, arguing about whether he could take it on as a carry-on. Because Diego Maradona was sponsored by McDonald's at the time. This is in about 84, I think. So he'd stolen the life-size Diego Maradona from outside of McDonald's. And we're walking down the street, and it was just like, this was an educational...
compulsive theft, yeah.
Yeah, this was an educational exchange, and it was an exchange in the sense we learned a bit of Spanish, and the Spanish learned that we were thieving sods.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you're saying Viz, it shines a spotlight on the dark stratum, but to show the flip side of that, it shines a spotlight on celebrity as well. Now, Russell Brand's been in trouble lately, hasn't he? I think it's all coming out.
To put it mildly.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty nasty individual.
He's found obviously, Jesus.
Yeah.
That's convenient, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
I tend to find I get my most religious when I'm nearest to being charged on multiple counts for various misdemeanors.
Exactly.
Just saying, it's a complete coincidence. I have total faith in his faith.
Absolutely. This one's from the 90s, so this is when he was big on TV. And yeah, I mean, he was an insufferable twonk back then. And it's just so blatant, Russell Brand's voyage up his own nether region. And it's done in such a straight-faced way. It's done in the style of a Beano comic. It's like, oh, look, and God says, you have to go up your own bumhole to on a quest, and it gets down to the end, and he admits, no thanks, I think I've had enough of being completely on my own arse. But it's like the fact they've got a whole comic out of this, it's like,
but again, it's incredibly predictive, isn't it? It's easy to look at this.
They knew
now.
He was a bad one.
Yeah, it's easy to look at this now and say, oh, well, they're just describing what they were saying. But no, because Russell Brand was this cultural hero, and it's only now that he's gone through all these accusations.
Yeah, he was very Savilesque, because he was one of these characters who'd use innuendo and wink, wink, look at what I'm going to do to her tonight, kind of thing. And it was at a time when that kind of humor was a big thing, but at the same time, it's like it kind of foreshadowed. It's like, was it humor, or was he really just being himself, a bit like Jimmy Savile? Yeah,
but also it's interesting. I think Russell Brand's interesting because it goes to, we've been talking about Viz as a northern sense of humor.
Yeah,
I think it stands in direct opposition. Russell Brand and is it Russell Howard in the UK?
Yeah, very
there's a certain London centric, and maybe it's because London now is such a melting cultural pot that it doesn't have its own identity. But I'm not being mean. Like Russell Howard or people, I could watch a whole hour of them and not even raise a smile, because it's like watching someone in therapy trying to claim it's humorous. It's all personal. I can talk all personal anecdotes and as if anyone gives a toss. And I think there's a certain northern tradition as well, whereby you have to have material. There has to be a punchline. You have to set the joke up.
Yeah.
And I'm throwing in a curveball because we haven't compared any of this because we've got a few North American viewers. So it's very mean of us not to make references to North American humor. But have you seen Anthony Jeselnik?
No.
Oh, Stuart, you have to watch it.
Stand up or
I was going to say the British. Can you get to the comments just to see whether there's anyone who can respond? Sorry to be a pain.
That's okay. Jesus comes to those most in need of him, apparently. I think we definitely need Jesus right now.
Well, I think you're mispronouncing it. It's Jesus.
That's Jesus. Someone's put that. Yeah, Alex has put that ass is not mutilated. Circumcised or down under Gentile tells us about celebrities. I think we're going into a dangerous avenue with that comment.
No, but what I was going to mention was, I think the stereotypical British attitude to American humor, it's quite supercilious. We tend to look down on American humor.
Yeah.
And some of that is justified. So, for example, what are you doing?
I'm trying to bring up my... there we go. Can you see it now? Yep.
Yeah, but that's a bit distracting, because then people are going to be looking at that, not listening to us.
I'm not going to be listening to you. Should we just remove that for a sec? There we go. Yeah, carry on.
Can you get the comments on the screen? Because then they can...
I'm trying to put it up. There we go. Thank you, Jimbo.
But, right, the contrast between American humour and British humour, so the go-to reference, part of it's justified. I think there is, we were talking about it off camera, there's an upbeat aspect of American culture that you don't get in British culture. And the negativity of British culture, I think, gives us an unfair advantage in the comedy stakes, because, as I mentioned, when the first caveman saw the other caveman stub his toe, I'd argue, and this is a personal point of view, but I'd argue that humour at its core is cruel. And it's possible to have non-cruel humour, I'm not denying that. And maybe it's just my personality. But I personally believe that humour is ultimately cruel. It has to be at someone else's expense to be truly funny. So the example I give is... I couldn't believe I got in an argument on a different channel with people in the comments because they were saying the US version of The Office was better than the British one. And what I found interesting about that was the British version of The Office...
It's a great example.
Yeah, even that the quality of the filming, it was dark and dank, and the American version was much better lit.
Yeah, higher production.
The people had proper teeth and weren't, it looked like the third stage of tertiary syphilis.
No polyester suits and
whereas in the
cold
UK,
coffee.
In the UK version, there were genuinely ugly people, whereas in the US version, there just aren't. And I'm not saying the US version was atrocious. It wasn't that bad, but it didn't compare. It's like chalk and cheese. Ricky Gervais in the original allowed himself to look into the abyss.
Yeah.
He really did. And it's really bugging me. That poet who referred to Slough being bombed, I think it's actually referred to in the British version of The Office.
Yeah.
But anyway.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because that's actually quite a good example of what you said in some of the Odyssey videos, that the Odyssey is referring back to deeper Greek myths that a Greek audience would have picked up. Whereas The Office is referring back to British humour, the history of British humour within itself. Does that make any sense? Yeah,
I'm wondering whether it's John Betjeman. I'm sorry, I'm now autistically just thinking, is it John Betjeman?
We'll find out. Jay's put a comment. Hey, Jay, how are we doing? Jay's put an interesting comment. I actually had this down in my notes. I'm going to bring it on the screen. So Jay's over in Texas. Fawlty Towers is the best comedy of all time. It'd be interesting, Jay, if you can put in the comments what you find funny about Fawlty Towers, because I was reading an article that American audiences, I don't want to preempt you too much, but American audiences found the more the slapstick element funny, whereas actually Fawlty Towers, it's funny because it shows the class striatum in the UK or in England at the time. And the joke was more of a little man who thought he was lord of his castle to some extent. But it'd be interesting to see what you found funny about it, Jay. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I'll give you another anecdote, it's about the cruelty. I was in Scotland in Edinburgh, so this again must have been late 80s maybe, and the World Cup was on. Yeah. And Scotland were playing Germany, so there were some Germans in the bar. And there were 3 or 4, it was bizarre concatenation of events, but in 3 or 4 separate incidents, there were really bad head clashes. And the Scottish and German players clashed heads. And they did a replay, and you saw how bad the gash on his head was. And all the British people instinctively went, oof. And all the Germans were laughing uproariously. So,
his head.
No, seriously, it was like, ha 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 ha.
And then bashed the head.
Yeah. Then they showed the camera panned, and he had a big bandage, and they laughed even more.
Yeah.
And cruelty for British people, I think, is more Greek tragedy type. It's when people are brought down to earth. It's when people suffer consequences for their stupid actions. But the German humour was just full physical cruelty, makes me laugh type of humour, which I found slightly disturbing. But anyway, I hadn't finished my thought about the Americans. So there is a problem with American humour for me. It's too upbeat. It's too schmaltzy. But Anthony Jeselnik, I'd be interested in what Americans think of him. He does stand up in a really slow, deliberate, and it's about it's shocking the cruelty involved in that humor. It's obviously made up, but he jokes about the worst possible things that you could imagine. He once texted. It was he talked about how he texts immediately. Do you remember the Chicago Marathon when it was attacked and bombed?
Yeah.
And his immediate text was, "There are some lines you just shouldn't cross." And everyone goes into uproar. And there was someone in Australia got killed by a shark, and he had a cable program.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, he dressed up as a shark, and he had these women as sharks, and everyone was.
I think I know who you mean now. Yeah, I think I know the guy you mean. Yeah,
but he's done full Netflix specials. Someone's saying Sarah's saying Bill Hicks. Yeah, Bill Hicks. I think Anthony Jeselnik is a better looking disciple of Bill Hicks. But there's something about his delivery. He comes across as deliberately narcissistic and satisfied with himself. And that, what I'm struggling to express is I can't think of any British comedian who can manage what Anthony Jeselnik does. And I'm wondering whether that's a cultural difference or just the statistics that you have many more American comedians, you're going to get. I think American comedians inhabit
a dilution
extremes.
of the ponds kind of thing. Yeah. You're less likely to see the extremes because there's so much of the mainstream.
Yeah, but I do think that there is, when American humor is good, when I first went over there, I was expecting no sarcasm. And I remember bizarrely, because I went all across the country, I found Chicago had the most British sense of humor. I don't know whether that's still true.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but there was because we drove in a car at one point right across the country, and we had.
Could that be the Irish connection? Do you think maybe there's a bit of cultural bleed over into the Irish connection?
Possibly, but I'll give you again an instance. We had all these interactions with locals as we went across America, and we were taking photographs. One of my mates was lying on the ground taking a photograph of a skyscraper, and a postman went by, like Cliff from Cheers, and basically said, what floor did you fall out of? And we came up at some traffic lights, and someone squirted us with water pistols and drove off laughing. It wasn't in an aggressive way.
A true Chicago drive-by.
Yeah, seriously, it was really funny. And I didn't see that as much in other cities.
Yeah.
But I wonder what the humour likes in Texas.
Yeah, Jay said, so it was the slapstick that got him in. But then I think as he's got older, I wonder if this is because more and more British humour has been exported in the digital age and the home video age. So there's more of an exposure to, because I do hear this talking to American friends all the time. You know, that they do say, "Oh, I love British humour." You know, we are aware that British humour is kind of like superior in a way, not to like blow our own trumpets, Paul, but I think there's more of an awareness, and maybe people want to know a little bit more about it. They're getting more adventurous in the sort of things they're watching and reading. Like, I'm not sure.
Well, do you think it's like, if you think of Greece and Rome, I've always thought Britain is the Greece to America's Rome. So Americans are more practical, they're more powerful, we're more effete, but we have the culture. That I think the Americans have a slight inferiority complex. Our inferiority is we're just crap now, but at least we have the heritage. Americans are all powerful with zero heritage.
Yeah.
And Jay can do what he wants on his compound in Texas, but you can't make up heritage. It's not something you invent. It's earned over history. Yeah. So go on.
Talking about crap, that's actually quite a good segue into Let's have a look. Here we go.
Don't forget, Stu, someone mentioned in the comments Reggie Perrin. I wouldn't mind a quick chat about that when we have time.
Oh, we'll have a chat about Reggie Perrin as well. Yeah, we'll do Reggie Perry next. Actually, that'd be quite fun to talk about. So yeah, well, you've got the comics in Viz there, the cartoons, but then you also have the lampooning of the media. These like bizarre, strange stories that kind of lampoon the British tabloids, but they're done in like a serious way, and there's always kind of a scatological element to them, and they're always very surreal. I always kind of liken these bits a bit like Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer. I think this is kind of their sort of humor, like straight-faced surrealism. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
We've got another example.
Do you see Jay in the comments went to the same high school as Bill Hicks?
He said that, yeah, Bill Hicks.
Yeah, but apparently none of the humour rubbed off on him.
It's one for you, Paul.
I'm waiting for Jay to insult me back. Welsh couple jail.
Yeah. Pair assisted English tourist. It's a great one.
For non-British people, the Welsh, because I'm English living in Wales, but the Welsh have a tradition of not particularly liking English tourists.
Yeah. Who's this? Because Viz always use pictures of real people, don't they? Or like people from films, actors and stuff like that. I recognize these two. Is that Mary Whitehouse?
No, I'm ancient, but I don't. No, that's not Mary Whitehouse.
You don't remember it?
No.
And
I'm not that old, Stu. I'm sorry.
It could be a 9 naughty boy. So, Paul, you explain what this is lampooning, because Viz always has these, and I think these are some of the funniest things in the magazine. Like where these come from, these adverts.
I'm not quite sure on this one. It's just a child's toy, but obviously with Third Reich-ish connotations. So
they tend to be in like the celebrity magazines. The week in the UK we have like it's a bit like National Enquirer, I think, the American analogy. There's these celebrity gossip magazines, and sometimes they have women's magazines, and it'll be my boyfriend killed my brother's uncle. These kind of crazy stories. You don't know how true they are, but they always have these full page adverts in them for what we call in the UK tat. The Princess Diana on a commemorative plate or something like that, and it'll be first payment 99p, further payments £10,000, and they're basically rip-offs. They're like cons to trick old people. So an old person says, "Oh, I love Diana. Oh yeah, she was the people's princess," and then they'll send off the thing in the post with their credit card numbers, and they'll just get fleeced. And this is an ongoing thing in Viz. They basically take the piss out of them. It's like, here, Jesus, it's 200 quid. The attractive price of £199.99, payable in increasingly inconvenient monthly installments. But some of them just absolutely brutal. Hitler doll. The artist, the world-renowned doll artist, Milka Magnesia. And it's just some crazy woman. Yeah, absolutely hysterical.
But it's also in our current epoch, it's the amount that it's my very early point. I like Viz because of its cathartic nature, but so much. I've known people, and I'm sure you did in the university sector, where you're speaking, and I used to get exhausted because I'm just thinking of all the things I'm not allowed to say. And given that I'm borderline Tourette's at the best of times, the mental energy you spent in censoring yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas you read Viz and everything's on the table, you can say whatever you want. It's.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious about the psychological consequences of living in a society where basically increasingly humour has become underground. That doesn't strike me as particularly healthy.
That's a question, because when I was putting all this together, I was actually having to think, Viz is still going. It doesn't sell as much now because of the decline in print media, but it's still going, and it's still the same, and it's still lampooning the day-to-day. We've got Private Eye, but Private Eye, I would say, is more of a kind of middle to upper middle class, educated. It's not reserved, but it's a bit more kind of society, if that makes any sense. Whereas Viz really is the toilet, it really is the gutter. But apart from that, and political satire and political cartoons, like where is the space? If we want to talk about the digital world now, we want to talk about online and social media. Where is the space where this is happening now? What do you think? Because I think it's happening on social media. It's happening on Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. But it's very polarized. I think what's great about Viz is, and what's great about traditional media is it's one site, it's one place where all the lampooning is happening at once and everyone is being lampooned. Whereas social media is very divisive. It's like you're lampooning the other, you're lampooning the opposition, but
Yeah, I think it
it's
goes
not
to
going to
your
come
earlier
together.
point about the objectivity, because the Viz motto seems to be a pox on all your houses.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas what you're pointing to is, even I believe it or not, I do try, and when I watch all my weird YouTube stuff, I do try and get a balanced diet of bizarre stuff. But
Yeah.
inevitably,
So falling over and standing up
yeah.
videos.
But you you tend to get, in terms of politics, you just
Yeah.
go down. You can't help yourself. You tend to go with your prejudices and biases.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
your point is, when you're reading a physical copy of something that's been all brought together, you're forcibly, yeah, you can turn the page, but you're forced to confront opinions that you may not otherwise. It's a lot easier just to flick a channel on YouTube, or you never
Yeah.
get to see the channels you don't like because the algorithm gets used to your tastes. And it's
That's
a
right.
self-reinforcing prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's a big debate at the moment about the algorithm, and one of the big issues with social media since the very beginning is that it feeds you things to keep you engaged. It feeds you things to give you those little dopamine hits. It's not feeding you challenging stuff. Whereas the Viz, there will be stuff. I mean, even people who have a strong sense of humor will find stuff in the Viz that offends them, that shocks them, and that's part of the point. It's kind of, I guess it's like de-armoring in a way. It's really making you confront your prejudices.
Yeah, Jimbo saying gutter humour's always been somewhat underground. True, but the Hogarth, you made the point earlier, the Hogarth was a recognised artist, and Punch magazine
Yeah.
was mainstream.
Well, Hogarth,
And
I read Hogarth. You could actually go to print shops like in those ages. It was basically like the VHS rental of the day. It was like you could rent a print to put in your house. So people of all society were enjoying this type of art. So that would negate that argument that it was always underground.
yeah, well, I also think there's a disparity now that's more marked than ever before. Yeah, of course, there's always the mainstream and the underground, but as we've pointed out, Rabelais was literature, Chaucer was literature that was widespread, Hogarth was
Yep.
a recognised artist, Punch was a mainstream magazine. The scatological and the scabrous has always been at least partially part of the mainstream until now, when
Yeah.
it's gone on to not even underground sites, but social media, as you point out, or YouTube. There's a counter narrative to the dominant, and maybe this is why the legacy media is slowly dying by 1,000 cuts.
Mm.
But I worry for the health of a society, whether it's in your Western society, whereby the disjuncture between what's officially allowed to be said. It reminds me of the old Soviet Union.
Mm.
There's the official Pravda position, and there's what people actually think. And that's now currently playing out in the UK in the political scene.
Yeah.
The political class in the UK have, up until the recent election results, have had no idea. They keep getting told, but they don't listen. They don't realise how angry the population is. And
Could it be because they can't listen? Could it be because their framework of reality won't allow them to see what they're seeing? They won't allow their brain to comprehend what their eyes are seeing.
it's the bubble. They live in a
Yeah.
technocratic bubble. And it's your point, though. When it was at its best, legacy media forced everyone in. The bubble was much bigger because everyone was forced to see things they may not agree with.
Yeah.
Now, especially with younger people, you can go through your whole life only ever watching stuff you're predisposed to agree with.
Yeah.
And that worries me. And the whole where it relates to Viz is, A, they tended to insult absolutely everyone. So your own little, sacred cows would be ruined. And there doesn't seem to be a particular topic off limits. And I'm not massively in favour of, unadulterated, uncontrolled crudity, but there is a quality to it. Because I'm ultimately a prude. But there is an aspect of it that is anti-establishment and needs protecting, and this constant desire to censor everything is what I think Viz, because it's so crude and because it's so puerile, people sometimes fail to see its bigger significance, what it's actually safeguarding.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say going back to legacy media, I mean, growing up in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot more space on television. If we put the print media aside for a sec, there's almost space on television for this kind of subversive humor. I mean, even in the BBC, you know, you had people like Chris Morris, Armando Iannucci. You had like the young ones, comic strip, bottom. You know, all these TV shows that couldn't get made nowadays, but they were on TV. They were on the BBC. You know, obviously late at night. And then in the 90s, you had Channel 4. They did a programming block on Fridays and Saturday night called Four Later. You had Eurotrash, which was, you know, it's basically smut, wink, wink, kind of smut. Chris Morris did Jam, which was probably one of the most craziest comedy shows that he's ever done. It's very aggressive, like bizarre, surreal humor. And then afterwards, you'd have, you know, softcore porn and all sorts of weird stuff on. But I've done in a, you know, I say arguably intellectual, as intellectual as you could make stuff like that.
I'm sorry if it's not directly relevant, but do you ever remember the late night discussion program Channel 4 did for a while?
Yeah, what was it called? I do remember there's a couple of on ITV as well.
After hours or something, I've forgotten.
Yeah,
but
another one you mean.
For those not familiar with the UK scene, it's one of the truly, I saw it live. It was this late night program, and the premise was it was a panel to discuss politics, and there was a drinks trolley, and people just sat on these sofas, and they deliberately got people from diametrically opposed areas of culture. And the idea was the conversation finished when the actual participants got bored. So it said, for example, arguably it started, I don't know, say it started about midnight or 11:30 or something.
Yeah, it was very late.
It sometimes went on till 4 or 5, or theoretically it could finish at 2 or 1. And one night, it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Oliver Reed was on, and they had a female feminist academic. And Oliver Reed went over to the drinks trolley and demolished it, and got, I think he arrived drunk. Have you not seen this? Oh, please.
I need to look it up. Yeah.
You need to go and see it. Because one thing, he's wearing a leather jacket, but he was relatively late in his life, and he was, you know, as fat as I am. He had a big beer belly, but he had this leather jacket, and he started this impromptu rendition of Wild Thing.
It was called After Dark.
My heart sing, and he's going for it. And then he's babbling incomprehensibly, and then he sidles up to the feminist and starts chatting her up.
Kate Millett, yeah, I've seen the video. Oliver Reed gets sloshed and irks feminist Kate Millett on After Dark.
Oh, and that made me think that was like a bit like Viz as a discussion program, and Sid the Sexist as Oliver Reed.
Yeah,
it was priceless television.
But that was the zeitgeist at the time, because you went through the 80s. I think Thatcher was elected in May 79, and the first issue of Viz, it was either November. I think maybe they formed in November 79, and the first issue was published in December 79, or the other way around. That was the time. It was a time of kind of, you know, dialectical opposition in the UK for 10 years, and the humor that came out was very biting, was very satirical, and I feel the 80s was the birth of it all, and it really it carried through into the 90s. But then you hit the 2000s, and I can vividly remember the 2000s. Everything just, you know, it tanked a little bit.
Well, my theory on that would be
being banned.
I would call it affluenza. I think the problem is, if you look at the history of great art, it tends to be produced in violent or poor places of the world. So in Latin America, you know, the great magic realism revolution in literature, they were all pretty dysfunctional countries, very poor, constant strife. Garcia Marquez, those type of people, Allende. The whole of magic realism, Cortázar, there was a whole birth in the 70s and 80s of Latin American literature. Like you've pointed out, Britain's humour was at its darkest and best during moments of social strife. And then you get to the 2000s, everyone's got loads of money, everyone's got a 4x4. It was a relative economic boom, and guess what? Creativity goes down the Swanee.
That might be a good way to close things, Paul. I mean, we're now in another, well, I mean, you are, I'm not, but I escaped. We're now in a point in the UK where I think times are getting hard for people. So do you think it could be an opportunity for a kind of re-emergence of subversive humor, or or do you think this wouldn't be allowed in today's climate?
Well, I don't know. I don't have a lot of good to say about social media and alternative media normally. But if you think of what the likes of you and I are trying to do on YouTube, that was never available before.
Yeah.
And I used to do quite a bit of work on Radio 4 and 3.
Yeah,
And
I
as
remember,
my late father said, I had a face for radio.
Were you on
But
Woman's Hour? Used to be
yeah,
on
all
Woman's
the
Hour as a
time.
contributor. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
But that, all things come to an end because that just went woker and woker and woker. But even then, what I found, it was debilitating. So you're on a platform, you're speaking, and millions of people listen to the BBC. So you think, whoop-de-doo, I'm getting listened to by millions of people. But actually, they wanted an academic, but they didn't want any academic content. So I remember arguing. I eventually got taken off because I argued with Jane Garvey. I talked about I was only good. It was about small talk. The final appearance I ever did. It was a ridiculous topic. They used to pick really stupid topics, and you're supposed to pretend you can say something intelligent from an academic point of view about something that's completely non-academic. So we were talking about small talk and about parties, and I said, it's quite funny. I've always had a problem speaking to very good-looking women. You know, typical man thing. You get tongue-tied. But I said to the woman, the presenter, Jane Garvey, I said, I don't have any problem speaking to you, Jane. And there's like a 10-second delay. And then she realised I'd insulted her, and she kept saying, but he's insulted me.
Oh, no.
And then basically she ended the segment, and I never went back on Woman's Hour.
Yeah,
I thought it was a suitably downbeat way to leave the programme.
Well, it's interesting. I think if you said that to a northern lass or said that to one of the fat slags, she just would have probably hit back with her insult of her own.
Yeah, but do you see the point is that you get many exponentially less people watching you unless you hit the big time, but then the algorithm starts controlling you. You only do what the algorithm lets you. Yeah. But there is stuff on YouTube that I am genuinely in awe of. And there is so much there. Yes, there's so much dross, but it's a genuine alternative to the legacy, claustrophobic ideological bubble. That it's just a shame that, it's like the Wild West, but it's not a bad analogy, is it? If you think of America Wild West, that is YouTube and other platforms.
That's what it is, yeah.
And it's exciting, dangerous, and, you can come a cropper. But I quite like the anarchy, and there's an ability to question stuff. And the likes of you and I, so for example, 20, 30 years ago, if you wanted to do a deep dive into Heidegger, you're limited to university libraries and blah, 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 blah. But you've now got access to there are some brilliant people talking about Heidegger on YouTube.
Yeah. Which hopefully introduces people to some big ideas. I mean, I think some of the biggest channels are these kind of philosophy little kind of, I think they call them deep dive videos, 10-minute videos where someone's taken key philosophers, and because of the size of YouTube, you've got any philosopher, really people who really are known, people from philosophers from different cultures, Chinese philosophers, Indian philosophers, it's also some like Nigerian philosophers, and you get 10 minutes and you can get the key points, and sometimes they're presented in really funny ways, educational ways, and whatever you want is out there. I mean, you have to sift through the dung heap to get to the goods, but the fact that you can do that nowadays is amazing.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know about you, I think deep down at heart, I'm a bit of an anarchist, and I do not like control, and I do not like the legacy media's ideological conformity. And to bring it all back to Viz, there's an anarchic streak in Viz. There's an uncontrollable, if you wanted to be uber pretentious, I've just used uber as a non-taxi etymological bit of pretentiousness. But if you wanted to be really pretentious, Viz is Dionysian. It goes back to ancient Greece. It's bacchanalian. It's out of control. It's controlled anarchy in a crude form. And I think that is a good thing, ultimately.
Absolutely. A creative anarchy. Yeah. Long live Viz.
Yay.
Yeah. I wonder if they watch this. I wonder if the editors, because I think the guy who started it, he's not part of it anymore, I don't think. I think he's opened a bar in Newcastle, my dad said. He's into the drinks business. Yeah. Why, man, having a pint? Newkie Brewing, man. Away,
the lads.
Away, mate. Coming down big market, like. They're not doing well this season, are they, Newcastle? They've gone down the table, mate.
No, but the Mackies, I like
Mackems, yeah.
I like
they're on the up.
Sunderland. If I was going to sub, I'm much more of a Sunderland fan, so I'm happy for Sunderland. They've stayed up.
Yeah,
Good
the
on them.
underdogs. Good for Sunderland, yeah. On that football-rated note, I think that's our time, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone for watching.
Yeah, we will be. We doing Proust in a week, from Viz to Proust.
From low to high. We are doing Proust next week. Yeah, next
Will
Thursday.
you send me
next Wednesday?
Yeah,
I'll send you the pages.
Yeah, you send me the pages, and I'll make sure to stick it on the system so people know. And onwards and downwards with endless videos on the Odyssey for people.
Absolutely.
So thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. All the best.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Have a good day.